All right, so welcome to the Starseed Ascension Zoomcast. We have Marilyn Prosper, and she is also known as the Tempest de Lumine. I knew I was going to fluster that after we talked about it so much. But yeah, we're excited to have Marilyn on today as our guest, and she has just amazing and powerful gifts. And we're so happy that she is a part of this process and sharing her abilities with the world. And Marilyn, just wanted to check in with you, and if you could share a little bit about your background and your journey of what led you into the work that you're doing now. Anything you feel called to share.
Right, I'll share, I guess I'll share like a linear timeline sort of story until it gets non-linear. Um, but I was working in asset management, actually fairly recently. I only quit in 2022, but before that, I was consistently working in technology. And 2020, like many of us, I had my awakening, and it was a very interesting awakening. Um, and somehow I found a woman by the name of Andy Murphy, rock and roll shaman at the time. She no longer goes by that name. And I ended up in a bunch of her classes, and it was great because it helped me to navigate the reality that I was now in, because I was kind of clueless, to be honest. And it was interesting because then she taught one class in your Starseed Ascension. I think it was 2021.
Yep.
And so I was just like, oh, let me sign up for this. And at that time, I had signed up for quite a bit. I think many of us have. Um, and yours, I actually attended, right? So there was a lot that I signed up for and a lot that I just couldn't do because of just the amount of stuff I signed up for. And it was such a beautiful experience. And we've talked. It was in that one-on-one that I realized then, sort of like scratching the surface of the magnitude of what I was able to do, of my abilities. But I was still navigating, right? At that time, I really couldn't, like, most of my clears weren't really on. More so that clear cognizance was on, and that's about it. And so that is how I navigated my reality. And I just had a lot of trust, and a lot of faith. And eventually I was asked for even a lot more trust and a lot more faith. But that's how I started. But when I really think about it, even though my awakening was in 2020, I realized that the journey started when I was carrying my daughter. I have one daughter, because her frequency was so high that I shifted. I was very toxic, I would say. I was in a toxic relationship with her dad. I worked at a toxic environment. It was a credit card company. And it was really interesting, and I was very angry. I was a very, very angry person. But somehow I realized, like, I wasn't so angry anymore. And I couldn't understand why, except, oh, I guess this is what happens to pregnant people. And then when she was born, about a few months later, I decided to take transcendental meditation. And so I learned to meditate. And I didn't even think I could sit for 20 minutes because I'm always moving around, but I did. And I would not constantly, I would every so often drop into pure consciousness. I didn't know it was pure consciousness, but it was that stillness and silence. And then eventually, after doing that, I don't know, my sister mentioned QHHT. So I did one session with someone, and who actually is doing really well on Instagram. And it was a profound experience, but it just all of that just stopped, right? It was just these little bits and pieces every so often. And now I realize I even was having ascension symptoms, but I thought I was losing my mind. Um, I had like the worst brain fog, and people could say parasites, yeast, what, it was none of that. I now know what it was. So I ended up going to a neurologist because I was just like, now something's wrong with my brain. But I was fortunate enough to end up with a neurologist that wasn't like a typical MD neurologist who wants to prescribe. And he introduced me to Robert Monroe's work, the gateway experience, right? The out of body sort of astral travel. And he just put me on regular like supplements, GABA, 5-HTP, specifically for my brain. He talked about frequencies, binaural beats, and all the things. And, and I realize now, like all along, like he was sort of inoculating me with all this little wisdom. It still was like, went over my head. I had like no clue. But I realize now that when I woke up in 2020, I at least had some semblance of a foundation, which was really, really cool. So I could at least, I had journeyed enough with Robert Monroe that when someone led a journey, I could kind of like follow, right? So it was really cool. And then, and this is where it all gets nonlinear, where now just really dropping into my own inner stillness always, within my heart always, I started to uncover what it is I actually do, because and what I do comes from the core of my being, right? It's not coming from anything outside of me. It literally flows from within. And yeah, I hope I kind of answered the question.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that sounds also like an amazing neurologist too, to
It's
turn.
amazing.
Yeah, very
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
So that sort of led you through your awakening process and, became nonlinear, like you said, which is, the world that feels like we're living in now. Um, so what kind of work do you do now?
So now, okay, so in 2021, I remember a friend was doing theta healing and she was practicing. And so I said, oh, okay, well, you can practice on me. And so it's subconscious rewiring, it's belief work. And I remember coming to her, I don't remember what the belief was at the time, but I remember I felt, I was like up in arms. Like she was asking me questions, and within me was just this torrent of energy that was angry and upset. And how could she be asking me this? And I didn't say that. And she's literally repeating exactly what I said. And I was so intrigued because she was still able to clear the belief and rewire my subconscious. So I was just like, what kind of magic is this? I want to learn it. It's not magic. It's just working with source. It's working with your consciousness, the unified field, and just rewiring your brain in a way that actually works. So I ended up learning it because I watched my ego, how immature it was, right? And I know that the ego is necessary to navigate this reality. And so I was sort of like, I need to learn this. So I learned it. I learned it for myself. So I thought I was never going to be a healer. I was never going to work on anyone. That was not my intention. I was just going to stay hidden and just be in my bubble, mind my own business and do the things. So then 2021, I knew I had to quit my job, right? I was on a funky timeline. I saw the timeline. I was going to get ill. And so I had to quit. And so I said, well, if one more thing happens, then I'll quit. Well, one more thing happened, and then I quit. And then I quit. But they loved me there. And they paid really well. They bonused really, really well. And so they're like, just at least stay until your bonus. So I quit in December. And so I said, fine. Bonus wasn't going to come out until end of January. And I said, well, I could use this money. So, okay, fine, because I have no plans. I have no idea what I'm doing after. I just, on a whim. All right, now I got to quit because I said I was going to quit. So,
now you have to.
yep. So I stayed until the end of, until February 4th. I remember that. And I remember was my last day. I worked like crazy and in a way that I don't think I ever worked. And I remember after I quit, I just sat in my bedroom, staring at one corner of the room for days, not thinking I was traumatized, but realizing as I was processing how traumatized I was. But because it was so much less trauma than all the other places I worked, that's what made it better. But it was still, it was still it was toxic in some ways. And then I finally passed that point. I was just like, well, what the hell am I going to do now? And I just kept hearing, well, you have theta. Like, why don't you do theta? And I was absolutely not. Like, no way. And so I was spending all my money like I still had a job. Like money was still coming in. And then I was just like, I'm going to have to do something soon. Why don't you do theta? Obviously, it's spirit speaking to me. And I'm just like, get out of here. And then finally, I decided, all right, only friends and family. And friends, sure enough, did let me practice on them. And eventually, it was just all by word of mouth. And then I just got more and more referrals. And I got better and better. And I got better. And now I feel like I'm really good at it. But what was interesting is I remember in 2023, so I started theta in 2022, actually, before I get to 2023. And then Spirit says, why don't you start that body architecture that you've been doing? And I'm like, no, that's just for me. That's what I do for myself. It's my medicine. Like, why would I do it on? I don't know. I don't want to break someone. I don't want to cause someone harm. Like all the stories, right? And then it was just like, then I noticed like a pullback in people who needed sessions, right? And so I was just like, fine. And so I started doing that. And then it was, why don't you start doing readings? I was very judgmental about doing readings, very judgmental, which is a good thing because I started to notice my own judgments about a lot of things just by that judgment that I passed on doing readings. Because I literally said, so I went and got my master's to sit here and do readings. Like, why ever would I do that? What about all this stuff that I did before? Blah, 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 like, all the stories. And then there was another pullback and I was just like, fine. And my readings weren't like a 1-card pull, a 2-card pull, or, a card reading. It was a full report, which I was not expecting. And it was pages long, which I was not expecting. And so, and I had quite a few. No, I had like maybe over a dozen within a short matter of period of time. And so I did these readings, these reports, these channeled reports, and I was exhausted. And they said, great, you remember. So now you don't need to do those anymore. It really strengthened my channel. And from there, everything sort of took off, if you will. And so when I did body architecture on someone and I'm going in their body and I'm clearing their body and I'm turning on gifts, really, I was able to leverage what I was doing in the channeling because I'm channeling, right? And I'm listening and I'm doing it while I'm working with this. So I was just like, I get it. And I will not say no. I still said no, but I won't say no again because I get it, right?
Yeah.
So, And then by 2023, so this was all under my former business, Hades' Daughter. Things really picked up and I was super busy. And then I quantum leaped that first eclipse season and I heard, all right, you have a month and a half left. And I was just like, but this is just getting going. I thought maybe at least a year. Nope, that's it. And I said, but I just got like a one-on-one client and there's another one that's it. So I said, all right, well, let me just, and this is, me as higher self and soul and spirit, all having this conversation. Well, I made this commitment. Why don't I at least have an extra, like, I don't know, a month and a half is what I sort of like did. And I saw if that would work within the timeline. Yes. So that's what I did. And that ended end of September. And from there, as we spoke, I rested. And interestingly enough, because of the way my work is moving, I ended up in a master's level quantum mechanics class for like 2 weeks, which was really amazing. And it gave me the languaging to understand the broader work that I do for the collective. Because when I work one-on-one or if I'm doing a container, I honestly feel like that's 1% of all the work that I do. We've talked, Jamie, like I'm working in my sleep, when I'm lending my energy to create these blueprints and holograms and architectures for the collective, the broader universe, and so on and so forth, takes way more energy and effort. So then finally I realized like, all right, you're going to usher in the age of light. And I was just like, okay. So I started a Patreon in December. And so this was the third month. So I'm closing third month of doing that work. And it's essentially just bringing forward all of the knowledge that I've acquired, or I should say I've remembered, channelings with source, you know, I include clearings and downloads using Theta. I teach, I journey. So in the journey, there'll be activations and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm doing now. And every so often, I still see clients because they are like, I really don't want to go to anyone else. Can you just please help me with this body architecture or with Theta? So that's sort of like where I am now. Yeah, yeah.
That's beautiful. So then, Marilynn, since you kind of, you've been guided all along the way, it sounds like, and and that is, you have such a deep sense of trust, which is so important in the journey, right? When you're taking all of these kind of leaps of faith and to like have something close, right? And sometimes we will want to latch on to those as our babies and and not let them go. So was that an easy process for you, to close Hades' Daughter, to step into this new part of the journey that you're on?
I'm going to read you something that I channeled. This I actually was able to hear in 2021. And I remember Spirit saying, you need to go back to that note. You've had this happen to you, Jamie, where they tell you go back to that day that you wrote such and such. Well, this
Yep.
was mine. And I wrote it on March 2016, 2021. And they said, when stepping out into the unknown, trusting and having deep faith in the gnosis, you step out and realize your foot strikes the surface. It's almost invisible because its translucence is something you've never experienced before. It's a transparency because there are no programs attached. There's no opacity. There are no strings. There are no distortions. It is a trust you will have to go out on soon. Yet each step you take is met and you find that you are fully supported and cared for. A priestess will never go hungry. A priestess will never worry about a home because a priestess, like all beings, are loved and well cared for. So I remember, like I do a life review where I look at all these versions of myself that brought me to this point. And I'm like, that fucking sucked, that sucked too, and that was awful. And I see how I fought myself through each and every step of the way. And I'm over that. I think,
Tiring.
hmm?
I said it's exhausting that way, huh?
That's what I was going to say. I got exhausted. And so once that exhaustion passed, so when you're exhausted, it's easier to surrender and just go with the flow. Because at that point, you're just sort of like, whatever, just do whatever. I'll go with whatever. But then there comes a point where you're well rested, and that is the true test. And that's when I was reminded, go and look at that. And I did. And I was just like, you know what? There's something to this. And I want to do this willingly. And it's always right. It's always right. And I'm always having fun. And it's better than I expected. And even when I'm annoyed, like with the channeling, I'm like, that was what, 3 months out of my life that just gave me the biggest gift of a remembrance that I could have ever imagined. So stop. Under and let go. That's what this whole journey is. That's what I feel like this whole journey is, letting go and surrendering to your purest essence and allowing that to come through and to be that purest essence and doing from that to change this reality. And so now I'm just sort of like, all right, what's in, if and I don't chase anything, but I do ask, to be positioned where I'm needed and to let me see if I'm in my own way. And whenever I'm in my own way, I clear it. And yeah.
That's beautiful. Beautifully said. And the fact that you just had that channeling right there,
Oh,
that,
you can
that
tell me
fit
notes.
so
Changing
perfectly.
everything.
I was like, wow, like you even knew that was going to come up. That's amazing. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
So Marilynn, a question for you. When you had your awakening, did that feel like it was one moment in the journey, or did it feel like it sort of happened over time in 2020 when you felt like that?
You know what? It started first with societal awakening, and a friend was inoculating me in that way, and that was like, okay, this is a lot. Um, but not at the same time because I sort of had like researched certain things before. And then the spiritual awakening was different. I had followed a friend, and she sort of had been pointing to all the woes of society, and then she decided to have a journey. And I was just like, oh, let me sign up for this, like, why not? I'm home, just like everybody else. And lo and behold, she takes us on this journey to Sirius. And Isis was there, and she said, welcome home. One of many, but I didn't know at the time. And I was just like, oh, this is amazing. And it was so amazing. And I was just like, okay, something is, this is a little out there, but because even during those times when I was doing the Robert Monroe stuff, like sometimes I would fall asleep, where was I going? I wasn't really going anywhere. At least I didn't think, I don't know. This, I was actually somewhere. And so it was really a moment. I was just like, I was forever changed. I was just like, there's no going back. And yes, now when I look back, I see how I was sort of ushered into this process, and I wasn't just sort of like shoved in, but I kind of was, at the same time, because I was unserious. I was not expecting that at all, like at all.
And you had some of these abilities when you were younger, yeah?
I'm starting to remember that now. I shut down very, very early. I lived in Brooklyn, New York, and it was during the crack epidemic, and it was not good. It was not good for a sensitive person. There was a lot going on in my household. And so it was just, no. and I was like really big, shiny, and loud. And in a Caribbean household, you're not big, shiny, and loud, and certainly not in Catholic school. I got in trouble so many times. I mean, and I would say like I was, yeah, I was rebellious in school. I did really well, but up until maybe I would say that they broke me in finally by like fourth grade, fifth grade. And I was just kind of like exhausted of getting in trouble. And so at that point, just, become the chameleon and just, yeah, yeah, yeah. But meanwhile, but yeah, okay, you want that? Okay, yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And we see that, as a common thing to shut down. And what's beautiful, though, is that you have reawakened these abilities, these gifts, all of this power within, and all of the amazing things you're doing. And that you have a beautiful daughter as well, who you're very much keeping conscious and awake. And I love that. And she's gifted and magical and all of the things. So how has it been being on this journey as a parent? And how has your own experiences sort of shaped the way that you nurture those
Well,
abilities in her?
so I will say, as a parent, it has been there, you face a lot because, okay, so I pulled my daughter officially out of school in 2022 as well. And I started homeschooling, and that comes with its own bag of judgments from the world, right? And, but I did it for so many reasons, and I'm glad I did it because it's allowed her to keep her magic. I'm still learning to navigate that, but I feel like sometimes we're like a little team in a sense because her gifts are different than mine. She can see in a way that I can't, even though I know the answer, right? But I want to see it through her eyes, which is really cool. So, for instance, I'll create portals or collapse them or fix them. And so we'll walk, let's say, through Central Park, and she's like, "Oh, that's a portal." And I'm like, "I don't understand. How are you seeing this?" And she's like trying to show it and explain it. I'm like totally clueless. But I'm like, "Okay, well, do I have to fix that?" And she's like, "Yes," right? So she's now in contact, like in conversation with guides and spirit. And so I'm like, "Okay, thank you." Or um, you know, and I was explaining, my sister had a wedding recently, and I was in Florida, and I left my cats alone for a couple of days, and I was very nervous about doing it, and I wasn't sure if I should do it, but a friend of mine kept saying, "Cats are wild animals. They will remember they're wild when they need to." I'm like, "All right." So you taught her this, Jamie, remote viewing, because she had a few sessions with you and she remembers how to do it and she's gotten way better at it. And she understands boundaries too. So she won't do things without permission because we talk about permissions and ethics and all of that. So I said, "All right, well, can you check in on the cats and see if they're fine?" "Yes, they're fine. This, Tina's doing this, Grayson's doing that." "Oh, wow, that's really cool." So that's helpful. Um, yeah, she's just so gifted and so talented. But one of the things I think, particularly being a parent and having faced so much judgment, in Theta, we always ask like, how, because at first it bothered me a lot, and I had to sit with, well, how is feeling bad about this serving me? And I got the answers to that, but it really helped me to unravel the victim in everything. Like, there is not one thing that you can tell me I'm a victim of now, even the Catholic school experience. Like, there is not one thing, because in every single little thing that has happened to me up to this point, all I need to do is sit with it to see what did I get from it and what did I learn and see how it's shaped me to be able to do the things that I do now. And it's pretty amazing. And yeah, so in sitting with that judgment, it helped me to unravel judgment, even of myself, which has been super helpful, which I would have not had pegged that experience as doing that for me, but it did. It did.
Wow. Yeah. That is powerful, to be able to look at all of the experiences, your most painful ones, and to see that the gift and what it brought, to your experience and how it led you to this now moment even. It's
Yeah, yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
That's incredible. Good for you. Um, and so Marilyn, I do have another question then. You mentioned, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but you had gone to Syria and heard Welcome Home,
Mhm.
and ISIS was there and everything. Um, where do you feel like home is many places for you? Or maybe I'll reframe. Have you been, have you had experiences or incarnations on other planets and
So
perhaps even galaxies outside of Earth?
yes, because my work takes me outside of the universe, all the things. And so in that, I finally just was like, all right, source, I've had enough. I've been all over. I'm looking for this home. Like what's home? And I actually ended up with my origin story. And it just keeps unfolding. And the bottom line is I ended up right back, which is what feels like home to me, is that pure consciousness. I didn't think I was going to end up there. I was waiting to be on a planet, but there are too many planets that I've had many incarnations on, and some for really long periods of time. So that for me is just sort of like, it's a home, but it's not the home. The home for me always is whenever I am in pure consciousness. That, I don't know, is like everything. It's the one thing that makes the most sense for me. It's the place where all of my creation energy comes from. Um, yeah.
Love
So
it.
even like, you know, have I been, I remember I was talking to a friend and I said, yeah, because she goes, oh, she was telling me this angelic type that I am. And then another one came online. And then it was just like, oh, okay, I've spent a lot of time with as this star race and that star race. And she said, no, 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 that star race cannot like reproduce with this star race. And I said, but I said, okay. And then she sent me a video to back up her claim. And I was just like, okay. And I was just like, you know, I said, what are you, like, ultimately, what are you? And we agreed, pure consciousness. And isn't this all a projection of your moment? So can't you do whatever you want because you have free will and you are an infinite being? Yes. So then does what you say make sense? No. And so there goes that. So
Yeah.
a lot of us have been all the things, quite literally, because, a lot of us are older than all the things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you bring up such an important, you know, um, another important point to this whole journey, which is discernment, right? Because there are going to be different perspectives, and so for you to trust what was coming through for you, to be true over a video to back up, right, a claim. So
Yeah,
so
exactly.
important.
And whenever I sit with Theta, a lot of my trauma is soul trauma. And so, it will take me sometimes to another galaxy, another universe, another planet, sometimes here, sometimes a past life here, sometimes inner child. It's just, it's vast. It's vast. We're vast. So
Yeah. So because you have had all of these mystical experiences, Are there any that stand out to you as like, whoa, my mind was blown? Or is it just become such a common thing? It's just like, where am I traveling to tonight?
No, it is more and more common. But every time this is the one thing I think that really does blow my mind is what I'm able to create for the collective at large. That to me is always sort of like mind blowing. And every time I'm like, wow, that was huge. Then it's like, oh, that was just a speck, or that was just a drop in the water. Now you remember, now go and do that, even that other bigger thing. And so then I'm mind blown with that. Like, you know, for me, all right, so I'll tell you two projects that I worked on. So I had to open up a Stargate portal in Central Park. And then I built the Sacred Union architecture. It took 9 months to build this hologram, right? With spirit. And then I go and I'm like, all right, I don't know how this works out. And then I have this complicated set of instructions. And I'm like, this is stupid. I'm going to be in the park. This is going to be embarrassing because it was a whole ritual situation. And I was just like, is this really necessary? It was. And so I, brought this hologram with me because I have a specific place that I build these things. And I am now at the Stargate, and I actually brought Mimi with me, Mimi, my daughter. And no, I didn't. I asked her because I realized I got sent an image of the Stargate, and I saw like a whole host of beings there. And I said, there's a lot of beings there. Can you go and look? How many are there? And she said, at least 200. So they were prepping the space for this hologram upload. And so that was a big deal for me, right? Like to me, that's huge. I was just like, this is like really something else. So of course I put it in. By the time I put it in, it was like not a big deal. Like at least I can't see. I'm nervous. I'm in the park. I'm doing the things. I'm putting the thing in the ground. There's people passing by. I'm like, oh my gosh. And my concern at that time was, please, I don't want a parent from my daughter's school. We already have
The
like
test of
gone, right. We've gone so far off the grid at this point. I pulled her out of school. They probably think I've gone crazy. They're gonna see me doing this stuff. But anyway, all went well. And I even then I got the courage and I was just like, you know what? It is what it is. Put the thing in the ground, come home. And I was like, I went in and I saw like what I actually uploaded, and I was just like, whoa. And then I have this friend, she can usually see my work. And I'm like, can you tell me what I just did? Because she can see in a different way as well. And so she explains it to me. Now I knew what I built. I knew all the things that went in it. But then the following year, 2023, it got even bigger. I can't really talk about the work, but what I can talk about is this time it wasn't just building this one thing for Earth. And I was explaining this, like, I have to take into account all of not only the galaxy, the universe, but the other universes. And when I say the multiverse, yes, the parallel, but also the other universes that exist. So now I'm like, whoa, right? Like that's really huge. And yet at the same time, I'm like, when I sit with my origin story, it's sort of like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, of course I would know how to do that, but it's so exciting. And it
yeah.
beats at a desk going on a Zoom meeting, right? With like, in the toxic environments I was in before. So it is exciting. And I feel really honored and blessed to be able to do this in a physical body. I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Well, I feel honored and blessed to know you, and also that you chose to incarnate in this body at this time. Time honored.
Yeah.
Love it. So Marilyn, I have your information I'll be posting in the info below the video. And we also have your Instagram, Tempest de Lumine. We'll have you say it as well.
Yeah, so it's Tempest Illumine. So in that changeover from Hades' daughter, and after that rest period, and saying, okay, next you're bringing in the age of light, because I had anchored in love so much, especially bringing in that sacred union, it was sort of like, all right, this is the natural next step. And so really, it's the temples of light within and without. And every so often, like I said, I do still have body architecture clients. I still do theta. Body arc, I call it body arc, but it's body architecture, really is about going in the body and collapsing out what no longer serves, what no longer belongs, and turning on whatever needs to be, whatever is coming forward to be turned on at the time. So can I just give one example? It's a
Yeah,
so
please.
I have a client who became a friend, and she had the most awesome. So we had done quite a few clearings, and then this most beautiful biosuit came online. It is so amazing. And it was just ready to go. And funny enough, she said, Marilyn, I activated the bodysuit, yes, biosuit yesterday. And today she burned her hand on a pot, and the burn is gold. She sent me the picture. It's literally gold iridescence. And I said, well, there you go. She said, but I tried to rub it off because this is not like, a burn is not gold, right? Like on the palm of your hand, it would not be gold, but it was gold iridescence. And I said, she goes, it's not what I expected. I said, it never is, but isn't it beautiful? She was like mind blown. And
Wow.
we'd work together. So all sorts of things get turned on, all sorts of trauma gets moved out. Soul fragments, soul recall, like there's so much that happens. So yeah, I do that, and I do theta healing. Yeah, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, we'll definitely keep your info in there so the people can find you, because there are many that want to connect with your magic, and I love it. And you're just, holding that frequency like a champ over there and very humble as well. But yeah, we're very, very grateful for you and your abilities and doing the work that you do. And Marilyn, any intuitive messages that you feel called to share, like with humanity or anyone who's wondering what in the heck is even going on this earth?
Um, this is what I will say. There's a lot of stuff being presented to us in this reality at this time. If you ever need a discernment, now is the time. And so know the difference between your truth and what is being presented to you, and also be willing to even let go of what your truth is for the truth when it presents itself. Because if the truth with a capital T presents itself to you, that means that you have the capacity to hold it, and just be willing to let go and surrender to it, because that's a frequency that you're being called to hold that not many can hold. So a lot of discernment. um I always tell everyone, stay in the heart. A friend of mine who was also a healer to me would always remind me that the heart is the all. This was before I was awake. And so I actually started working on my heart before I was awake. I didn't know what I was really doing. I just drank a lot of cacao and just asked God to open my heart, whatever that meant. And it's not until I was awake and I really started to anchor in the heart that I understood that the heart is the all, and we are all, we are, and we are all one. And I am everything and everything is me. And that is goes for every single everything on this planet, quite literally. And so if you can remember that I don't take sides, um, my role on this planet is really to maintain the balance. And so I am really anchored in the center. I have to be. And so I'm anchored in my center. So if you can find your anchor in your center, magical things, like it just gets better and better, better and better.
Thank you so, so much. Thank you for your time, your energy today, your beautiful messages, and your experiences. Because, as you know, by sharing, that can help inspire or just bring awareness and even activate. So,
No, thank you too,
thank
Jane.
you so much.
Always say, you were one of the set of hands that helped to get me to this point, and I'm forever grateful. And I'm always so honored and so blessed that to have you as teacher and guide and mentor.
Thank you. I'm sending so much love to you and Mimi. Please send her
I'm gonna tell
my
her. I just want to
best.
thank you.
Aw,
Yeah.
love her. All right. Well, thank you so, so much. So good connecting with you.
Thank you too. Thank you so much.